let's start with obviously, the national championship. Go there first because that was, I don't know, it was a little underwhelming. I felt like
Yeah,
it was,
massively.
and it's not anything to take away from Baylor. I want to put that out there. Like, I don't think that it was boring because that like the teams were good or whatever. Like Gonzaga, it's just one of those things where like, and it always happens in the tournament where when a team comes off of like a huge win against like another team, and it's like emotional and everything, and it's so intense and all that. Sometimes it just happens where like the team is just drained. It's just you put everything into the previous game. You won it in overtime on a game-winning shot. It was wild. It was hyped. Everybody was excited. And then you go to the next game and you just don't have it emotionally because you put everything in the previous game. And that's kind of unfortunately what it felt like going into this national championship. Is just watching it kind of felt like Gonzaga was really just kind of drained the whole game, like emotionally and physically. I don't know. You watched the whole thing, right?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, no.
Yeah.
But
so what were your impressions of the game? Because that's kind of how I felt about it, just watching.
yeah, I felt the same way too. I feel like there was so much media hype around that, and there was so much time spent on that shot that like it pretty much, I mean, everyone was pretty much the same thing where it's like, yeah, that was probably like going to be that was basically the championship. That was going to be the best game this year. And I feel like they just were gassed because that felt like the peak, and they felt like they like peaked completely. And they had so much coverage over that. I'm sure they, had some sort of party or something and had like a good time and everything to celebrate, because how could you not? And then you got to come into your next day going in on a Sunday and pretty much be like, okay, this is your recovery day, but you also feel like garbage still from the night before. And then by the time you're starting to feel better and actually get rest, like boom, it was Monday. I think it was Monday night, right? And they ended up playing. And yeah, I feel like they were definitely gassed. And all that hype like took the wind out of their sails.
Yeah, exactly. That's 100%. That's how I felt. It just was one of those where watching it, like normally, again in the tournament, it's one of those where, and this is what happens when a team like makes a major upset too. Is generally when a team makes like a major upset, like a 5 over a 12 or something like that, or a 6 over 11. Usually those type of upsets that are pretty big, nobody expects it, end up the next game the team ends up not performing very well. We kind of saw this back with that massive upset with the 16 seed over a 1 seed back when Virginia got beat. That was one of those where yeah, of course, that was my team that I had picked the championship that year, so that was fantastic. But anyways, yeah, no, it's just one of those where like you watch them and they won by like 20 points. So it was convincingly. And you're like, okay, maybe this team's really good. But then it was one of those where the next game they came out and they were kind of drained, they're kind of tired. And it's really because it's just all the emotion and it kind of gets the best of you. It's just like all the emotion comes out in the previous game. And that's really what happened in that game with Gonzaga over UCLA. By the way, that was a fantastic game. I mean, that was worth the price of admission to this whole freaking tournament. I mean, it was awesome. It was every second of that game was fantastic because it never felt like either team was above the other or better than the other. And UCLA was shocking this year. I mean, obviously they're the talk of the tournament this year at least. Baylor should be, rightfully so. They definitely deserved it and played well, and I'll talk about them in a minute, and we'll talk all their praise in the world. But UCLA did an incredible job this tournament. And like I said, it was a spectacular game, honestly. As the Final Four matchup goes, it was one of the best I've ever seen. But just at the end of the day, it was one of those where I think it just drained them too much. And then you go into a game against Baylor, who's probably the most complete and best, obviously the best team in the country, and rightfully so with the way that they played and the way everybody contributed. That Gonzaga just didn't have it. And then of course you look at the stats and like. I think the first half Baylor shot like 70% from 3. So it was one of those where Baylor's just on fire.
They literally could not miss. It was just it was unbelievable.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. I mean, you were just watching the whole time and you're just like, I don't know when these guys are going to miss. And then there was other things too. Like I forget his name. I didn't learn the names of the players. That's probably my fault, but I mean, it's a tournament. But there was one kid who I think he scored like 1 point the entire game, but he had like 9 offensive rebounds. And it was just that to me stood out because that was like that right there shows you like who was the complete team, who was the best team. Like that, when you have a guy that scores 1 point and is able to contribute and plays his role so effectively that he ends up with 9 offensive rebounds, and a couple blocks defensively. That just goes to show right there that they were a complete team and everybody played their role well. Everybody contributed. There wasn't like a guy who was sitting on the bench or something like that. Everybody obviously contributed in their way, whether it be rebounding, whether it be defending. Their defense was unbelievable. I mean, the whole game, it was just stifling. Like, it was, and then the effort too is what stood out to me with Baylor. Is a lot of times you can play defense well. In a lot of defense, you'll hear guys say that defense is like it's 50% effort and like 50% like actual knowing where to be and stuff like that. Because it's true. Because a lot of defense is taking you have to use the energy and the effort that you have in order to actually make the play, whether it be a steal, whether it be a block shot, whether it be getting over in a rotation fast enough to close out and stop a shooter from having an open shot, and contesting shots and just getting a hand in the range of a shot. That's the type of stuff that makes you a great defender and makes a team a great defensive team. Is actually putting in the effort and energy to do so, as well, not for just 5 minutes or 8 minutes bursts in a game, but for the full 40 minutes. And that's what Baylor did. I mean, it was a beautiful thing to watch, the full 40 minutes of them just playing unbelievable defense. Like, there's times where like Gonzaga would go on a breakaway after a steal or something like that, or a turnover, and they'd be driving down the lane. It'd be like 2-on-1 or 2-on-2, and the first guy would make a good defensive decision to like force the dribbler to take the shot instead of him dishing it to the other guys. And then you would see two guys coming from behind on Baylor running full speed down the court, never slowing down, never taking a second. And like, it was a couple times there, it was crucial. I mean, there was a couple times where I saw one guy go up for a thing and he was waiting for the other two guys to jump, and they did, and then he was going to go up with it after and probably get a foul and possibly an and one, and then all of a sudden a third defender from Baylor comes flying out of nowhere over and swats the ball out of his hands to stop the play. It's just things like that where the whole game were just, it was incredible. I mean, they're just a very well coached, very skilled, very talented. They all knew their roles. They all played effectively in their roles, and they all did their jobs exceptionally well. They had, I think it was like 12 minutes or something. It was something, I couldn't remember what time it was, but it was a ridiculous amount of time before they had a turnover in the second half. I mean, it was wild. The whole game, they definitely deserved it. They deserved to win for sure. That was, there's not a lot of times in the entirety of college basketball or even sports in general where you say that like a team definitively 100%, no refs, no arguments about calls, no arguments about, well, the team was injured or, well, the team was, like, that team looked 100% definitively like they deserved to win it, and they did. And it was a good story too, because I'd heard the head coach was a guy who had been there since I think like 2003, and when the program was basically in shambles, he came in like 2003 and said that, like, I don't want to make the tournament, I want to win games in the tournament. And then you look at the team, and I mean, 18 years later he's won a national championship. So kudos to them. Congrats to all of those guys, all those players, everybody in that organization that helped them get to that point. And kudos to that head coach for coaching such a incredibly well put together team that definitely deserved to win and did so very convincingly. So, and that, so your thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, there was there was a couple points in the game where it seemed like Gonzaga would actually be able to get back in, and every single time they got pushed away by like 4 or 5 more points. So, I mean, it was very definitive. There wasn't really like it could have went the other way. It was really clear cut, which doesn't make for the most entertaining game, but I mean, they dominated out of the gate for the rest of the game. So that was cool to see.
Yeah, it was definitely fun. I mean, it's always sad to see March Madness end just because of the madness aspect of it. It's just there's so many upsets, there's so many fun games, and because of the upsets and because of the games and because of us contributing or participating in tournament challenges and bracket challenges and making brackets, it always makes it it all elevates the fun for everybody involved. I mean, there's people that I know, especially even like my girlfriend, for instance, who doesn't watch sports outside of hanging out with me and me making her watch sports, but she didn't watch sports, but she's actually paying attention and watching the last 5 minutes of every game because she wants to make sure that her team wins or whatever. So that's the kind of thing that I love about March Madness every year, is that it's always a thing that brings people together in sports, and especially right now with COVID and everything like that. It was awesome to see a team just be able to go in, all these teams come in, go in, play. Other than the one team, which was I believe VCU, that got knocked out of the tournament very early based on COVID positive tests in their organization or close to the team, that basically led them to get kicked out, unfortunately. Other than that, I mean, everybody was everybody was safe, everybody was healthy, and the tournament was awesome. There was a lot of upsets. I understand what people might think, that it wasn't as exciting because and I think that comes from like people not knowing the teams and not knowing, kind of everything, like not knowing the players. You're like, the only name I heard all year was basically Cade Cunningham, who was #1 overall pick for sure, no matter what, in Oklahoma State. But I didn't really hear much about any other team. I mean, you did hear flashes of Illinois and Michigan and Gonzaga and Baylor, of course, because those are the 1 seeds and those are the teams that were dominating during the regular season. But you didn't really hear much about these other teams like UCLA or Maryland that played super well. All these other teams that did their part in making this tournament really kind of fun to watch, and with all the upsets and the unknown aspect of this year was really fun to watch. So despite not winning a single thing in my bracket and being probably one of the worst years for me bracket wise, it was still fun to watch. It was still a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you still had a good time at the end of the day. To the end of the day, it was still fun.
Yeah,
even if it breaks your bracket, as long as it's entertaining, who cares?
Yeah, exactly. And that's how I feel. It's one of those where I'm like, nah, it's okay that my bracket wasn't that great. Like I had Illinois winning it all, and so when Illinois lost pretty early on, it was one of those where I'm like, all right, I really don't have anybody in that I care about anymore. Like, I don't have a chance at winning this thing, so like, let's just root for teams that are kind of fun. So like, I was rooting for UCLA the whole time. I was rooting for like a Houston. It was kind of sad to see them lose, but again, obviously they lost to the best team in the country, so it's not too bad of a loss. But yeah, so it was a lot of fun. It was a great tournament. Sad to see it's over, but all good things come to an end, and that's what makes them good, is that they end at some point and then come back next year.
Yeah, and then hopefully next year they'll have full fans, and it'll be even crazier. Probably less. More predictable than this one, but yeah, it'll probably be a little bit more hyped up. That'd be fun to see.
Yeah,